Okay. Uh, so this might be kind of hard to watch. This isn't something that I usually do, but I'm kind of trying something different, um, mainly for myself. But if anybody watches this, I hope they receive just positive vibes, I guess. Um, anyway, my name is Kate. I go by Ghosty on Steam, wherever, Discord. And I recently came out as a transgender woman. Um, like I said, I'm mainly making this for myself. I'm hoping that in 2 years' time, I'll be able to look back on this video and be really happy with the progress that I've made. Um, anyway, I haven't written like a script for this per se, but I do have like a few bullet points that I wanted to talk over, I guess. And mostly this is just me kind of like working through some of my past issues and stuff. Um, I'm not a super talkative person, and I think that's sort of as a result of just years of being around other really talkative people and not being able to really get my say in all the time, which is okay. It's okay to be. I am also sort of an introvert, so it's okay to be that way. Anyway, so I guess my main struggle, and you can probably tell that I'm a little bit on the older side to be even, to be coming out. I'm 27 now. And I guess a big part of that struggle and why it took me so long to finally say to the world at large, like, hey, this is who I am, is because I was brought up to believe that that was wrong, actually. Um, you know, I was born in Texas, I live in Texas. Um, I was born into a very religious family, not like a traditional religion. Um, and I think a big part of my upbringing involved like the demonization of homosexuality. Like my parents, especially my mother, uh, spent a lot of time trying to dissuade me from being a gay man. I think that they suspected that I was a gay man, or a gay, young boy whenever I was young, even just because of the way that I carried myself and the way that I spoke to people, the way that I spoke to them. And so there was a lot of uh, just hateful talk towards the gay community in my household growing up. I remember one specific instance, and I've mentioned this a lot. I think about this a lot. Was my mother, my biological mother, saying at one point that she would rather find out that I was a murderer, like a serial killer, than a gay man. So, yeah. Anyway, um, there was a lot of that talk, and so I think just anything different, anything um, out of the ordinary, out of the traditional that they expected was really looked down on. But paradoxically, at the same time, my mom would tell me stories about me as a toddler and coming to her and asking her to do my makeup, which is not a totally unusual thing for a toddler to ask. And she would do it, and she would do it. So I think there was always sort of a push and a pull, and this was like a big theme in my life, especially after my parents got separated. When I was like 4 or 5, my parents got separated, and we spent a lot of time moving around. We spent a lot of time, especially at the beginning, going from my dad's place to my mom's place, and there was a very different narrative that was kind of portrayed at both places. My dad was still very, it still is, very traditional, religious, um, conservative, and my mother, she's conservative as well, but in more of a bigoted sense, I suppose, like deep South, rebel flag kind of deal. She would say things that I would really rather not repeat at all, and still does. Inexcusable behavior, but that was the kind of thing that I was exposed to as a young person, and it's surprising to think about now. The kinds of things that you would like get canceled for online if you had an online presence. Not that she really does, but that was just the kind of stuff that was normal and normalized in my household. Um, let's see here. So, so yeah, there was a lot of religious themes going around in my growing up. I was never really religious. I kind of just followed along with it a lot of the time, trying not to stick out, or else you'll get hammered down. And so, pretty quickly after my parents got divorced, my dad got remarried. I think a big part of the reason for that is because he never really knew how to interact with us. Like, he was around, he worked a lot, but whenever he came home, he would kind of just sit and watch TV and didn't really know how to conversate with us, didn't really know how to, like, get to know us. Um, we spent a lot of time with babysitters, which led to some unfortunate stuff as well. But anyway, he got married really quickly thereafter, after getting divorced, maybe a year or two after getting divorced. And he kind of just threw us on our stepmom, and she had no kids. She had no prior experience raising kids, um, and she herself was physically not in a place to be raising kids. Physically not in a place where she could have even had kids. Um, and it's unfortunate to say, but true. She was very absent because of her health, I think. She really struggled even just to get around a lot, and refused to do anything about her health, even though realistically there were things that she could have done. And so there were times where there were times in middle school where they would keep me home, or at least my stepmom would keep me home from school just so I could, deliver her stuff to her bed. So she wouldn't have to get out of bed, and she could call me from across the house and say, "Hey, I need a popsicle, or I need my purse, or whatever." And that was really common. That was basically how it was. My dad worked, and I have a brother as well. He was a big part of this. And I think at this time in my life, if I was really learning or developing as a person, it was because of my brother. Um, if I was being taught anything at all, it was my brother who was really stepping in, and he was a good guy. He has an interesting kind of thought process when it comes to all of this stuff. I don't know how he feels about me coming out specifically, but he was really good during this, like our growing up stage. He was a good brother. So anyway, um, as you could probably imagine, by the time I got into high school, I was really struggling with my mental health. Like I have a family history of depression and other mental health issues that I'd really rather not go into. But even before high school, I I was struggling with my mental health, and a big part of the reason for this is because internally I had been taught to hate a lot of the things that I was, a lot of the things that I thought uh, were they were taught to me as wrong. Uh, so I struggled with my mental health a lot. I maintained a lot of resentment, a lot of hatred. Like I felt like I walked around feeling like nobody understood me, or nobody could understand me. Um, and to an extent, that's kind of true for everyone. Everyone's like that. No one will fully understand the depth of you and who you are. Um, but it's also a very pretentious and very isolating uh, train of thought. It's not helpful. Uh, it's more helpful to kind of sit down and think like, how can I relate to this person, or how does this person feel, right? Try to empathize with people. And this is something that I didn't learn in high school. This is something that took me a long time to learn. And so I walked around kind of stewing in my own feelings for a really long time, just like really like being depressed and really sitting in it, not really not wanting to do anything about it. And I think partly because of my mental health issues, and partly because of my gender identity issues at the time, I was able to get, was in relationships even in high school, but I would struggle to be intimate. I would struggle to maintain relationships. I would struggle to. I think looking back, like I was the problem in a lot of my relationships because I didn't know who I was. I wasn't comfortable with who I was, and so I needed to get there. And I'm still working on it. Like I am not in a place now where I would feel comfortable being in a relationship, but I feel like I'm closer, and I feel like the way that those relationships were developing then was strictly unhealthy. It was not good for any of the parties involved. It wasn't developing relationships for longevity. Anyway, high school, it was kind of a blur. I started smoking in high school, which really opened me up in a lot of ways, not because of the smoking itself, but because one, I was going out and I was doing things that my parents weren't aware of, that were bad, that were considered bad. I don't think it's bad personally to smoke, but you know, being brought up in the church, that's what we were taught, is that kind of thing was extremely taboo. So I was doing that, and it was kind of opening me up to be more free and more adventurous, I suppose. And there's one event that really still to this day sticks out to me from high school. There was this girl that I was dating, and she was sort of it was maybe sophomore or junior year. She was sort of my introduction to the LGBT QA plus community, and for some reason, she was the first person that I felt comfortable confiding like how I feel in her. And I told her, there were instances from my childhood where I had like secretly borrowed clothes and stuff like that, and tried on clothes. And I told her about that, and it was the first time that I had expressed that out loud. One, and two, it was not a negative react. Like, I didn't receive a negative reaction whatsoever. In fact, it was an understanding reaction. It was kind of like, oh, that makes sense. Like, finally, I get you. It was like whenever I opened up, it was like I was realized, like, for the first time, I had been seen. And that was big. That was a big moment. And she probably doesn't think about it. She probably doesn't remember it. But I think about that a lot. It was a good moment. So anyway, moving the track forward, I graduate high school. I start going to college, and I move away for the first time. I moved to Corpus, and I loved living in Corpus. It was a beautiful Texas A&M Corpus Christi, beautiful campus on an island. But I was just depressed. I mean, I just was really struggling with my mental health, and maybe it was partly just like being in my own place for the first time. Even though I never really felt super close to my family, there was still like that semblance of a support network. And now I was really on my own. This whole time I've been working. I started working in high school. My first job was at a Randall's grocery store. For those of us who remember Randall's, I don't think that's around anymore. But, I was working this whole time and working to provide for myself. And At that time, my housing was paid for on student loans, student debt, and I started skipping classes. Like from freshman year, first semester, I started skipping classes. I started isolating myself. I had friends, but I wasn't making new friends, and my friends would invite me out, but I would ignore them, you know. And there was one time where a friend of mine, a really good guy, Matt, uh, came to my apartment door and knocked on my door, and I ignored it like I wasn't there. Anyway, just really struggling with my mental health, and so I didn't go back. My second semester, I just didn't go back. Cut my housing and all that stuff, and then I came back home to the Houston area to continue working, continue going to school. I picked up a shitty job working for a dish network, literally installing cable networks. It wasn't fun. Just anything, just any work I could get. And I was going to a local school there in the Houston area. And this kind of leads up to my first suicide attempt. Whenever the first time I tried to kill myself, I took a bunch of pills, um, and I was found by my parents, who took me to the hospital, and I narrowly survived, according to the doctors there at that time. That being said, it wasn't, like doing research in hindsight, it wasn't like a super toxic compound or whatever. But anyway, sorry. So maybe going into too much detail now, but all of this to say basically that I was really struggling, um, really having a hard time. So anyway, I spent 2 weeks in the hospital. I spent 2 weeks locked up in a mental ward, essentially. And when I come back, I just go back straight into the grind, pick up a job, continue going to school, pursuing a degree in English literature. Um, and, at this point in the story, I'm not sure. I lost my flow. Anyway, sorry. I'm maybe getting into too much detail at this point, but all this to say that I was really having a hard time, really struggling. Uh, and so I spend some time in the hospital, and I come back to going to school and working, and I end up getting my own place. Actually, twice this happens, but anyway, I end up getting my own place. I'm working, and I have a roommate that just loses their job or just decides that they're not into it or whatever, and they just say sorry about the lease and everything, but I'm gonna go ahead and skeet on daddle out of here. So twice I was left with a 2-bedroom apartment to myself, paying the full rent, which was pretty tough on my body. I ended up picking up second jobs. I was still going to school at the time, but I ended up taking a lot more student loans than I would have had to. I was trying to work my way through school, basically. And it was around this time that I started to get sick. This was a little over 2 years ago now. But I just started to get tired a lot more. Like I would come home and crash, and I would pass out for like 14 hours straight, and I would like be late for work and stuff. And then I started to experience a lot of pain, It started in my chest, and then I started to get it in my like lower hips and legs, and I was just really struggling to do anything or get around. And I didn't have time to go see a doctor. Like literally, did not have time. Like between working two jobs, one of them a full time job, and one of them like almost 40 hours, like 30, sometimes 30 hours a week, and then going to school. I just literally didn't have time uh, to go to see a doctor. And so I inevitably got to a point where, I was working a shift. I waited tables for like almost 3 years, and I was working a shift, and I just got so fed up with the pain and with everything that I just quit. I couldn't do it, and so I dropped one of my jobs. But as a result of that, I couldn't like make rent, and so I was doing anything I could to pay rent. I took out a credit card and like maxed out the credit card just on rent alone. Um, and it came to a point where I was about to be homeless, and so I came to my parents and individually asked them if there was a place for me, like if I could stay with them. And I got mixed responses. My dad and my stepmom they had no space for me. They were not interested in keeping me, and they had just downsized. To be fair, they had just moved out of their 2-story home into a like upscale apartment kind of deal. Uh, so they didn't really have a whole lot of space, but they weren't interested in having me there anyway. And so that was understandable. So I went to my mom, um, who they have plenty of rooms, but they have, none of their kids are staying with them. My mom and her stepdad, between them, there's 5 of us. And so I came to them and said like, hey, I explained the situation, and they didn't have a place for me either. They said we don't want any of our kids to stay with us anymore, which was really saying a lot because like at that time my sister, their youngest daughter, was like 16 or something. So I don't know. I don't know what their mentality was, but anyway, I basically didn't have a place, and so I was looking down the barrel of being homeless. And luckily, my my uh, my best friend, my oldest friend, Jacob, was able to come and scoop in, save me, and he took me off, and we moved up to the Dallas area. And from there, I basically proceeded to spend an entire year in bed. I didn't get out of bed, um, except for basic necessity stuff. Literally, Jacob brought me food, and I just deteriorated. I lost a bunch of weight. I lost all of the muscle in my body. I used to do long distance running. Now my legs are like destroyed. Um, and long story short, I'm suffering from a neurological issue, but just going downhill really fast. But despite the fact that I'd lost my apartment, I'd lost basically all my stuff. My motorcycle got stolen around this time. Uh, I was in a better place in a way because it was around this time that I finally came out. Like I finally told Jacob, who at that point it's like my family. Jacob and his mom is my mom now. Came out and said like, hey, this is who I am. I'm a transgender woman. This is how I've always felt, and I wasn't rejected. I wasn't hated like I had feared I would be for so long. Like in dreams where I'm not a woman, it's generally like being caught out as a man, if that makes any sense. Like people point and laugh and say you're a man, and that's how I thought it would be for a really long time. That's how I thought it would be, even from my closest friends. But I received a lot of love and a lot of appreciation instead, and that meant a lot, and it still does mean a lot. But now I'm in a place where I feel like I don't care who knows. I would rather not get you know violently persecuted for the way that I feel. Um, but I'm not ashamed of it anymore. I'm not ashamed to be who I am, and it's a very liberating feeling. I'm hoping to go forward now and um, start hormone replacements hopefully soon. I'm struggling to find work still because of the my issue, but getting there, and things are getting better for sure. And I feel like maybe for the first time in my entire life, I'm looking forward to whatever comes next.